Hello, everyone. I think it's a good time to start as any. Welcome to our CEF online webinar, Context Broker and Public Administration in European Cities. I see that there are still people joining, but I will, before the very beginning webinar, I would like to remind the audience about the house rules on this webinar. So if there is a section dedicated to questions and answers at the end of the presentation, but in the meantime, if you have any questions that comes into your mind, please use the WebEx chat, which we'll be monitoring, and we will address the questions depending on the timing during the presentation or at the very end. Please try to mute your microphone to allow the speakers to be able to do the presentation appropriately. Normally the mute on entry is enabled, but one can never be too sure. And I would like to also remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded and the content of it will be shared through CEF Digital. This is our agenda for today. We will begin with our welcome committee, and Daniele Rizzi and Caroline Corno will briefly speak about the Commission data strategy and the CEF building blocks in general and the context broker. The section dedicated to the context broker will be handled by Stefano De Fantelis from Fireware, and my colleague Regina will give an update on the enablers of context broker, and I will briefly give you an update on the past months, the activities that we've been and the events attending, and also the upcoming changes on our digital content. Last but not least, we are very pleased today to have among us a representative from Open and Agile Smart Cities, Davor Meersman, and Mr. Vincent de Mortier from Faubourg Numérique, representing OASC France. So, without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Daniele Rizzi from DG Connect to give you an update on the EC data strategy. The floor is yours, Daniele.
Yes, thank you, Erbil, and welcome everybody to this workshop. I will make a short introduction just to provide a bit of a context of what the European Commission is doing, especially in this last period to support a healthy development of the European data economy. And if you can go to the next slide, Erbil, thank you. I like to, in a way, to show here, to quote a few lines of a very recent speech from the Commission President. There was a State of the Union address 1 week ago, where Ursula von der Leyen underlined the importance of the digital economy in Europe, mentioning a lot of issues and of challenges that we have to face. If you go to the next slide, you may see that there was also a quite specific and very interesting direct mention. No, go back once. Yes, yeah. A quite direct mention of what we are talking about today. So this need for common data spaces. I will explain a bit more in detail what we intend to with this definition of data spaces. But what is important is that it was clearly underlined that data are important, and of course data not for the sake of having data, but of course for the sake of using data for benefiting the European economy. With socio-economic benefits, environmental benefits, and so on. So if you go to the next slide, well, an optimistic message, because we often in the Commission tend to say, okay, we are lagging behind this and that, but actually Europe has all what is needed for becoming champions in the world in terms of digital economy and reuse of data in this specific case. We have our European values. we have a lot of strengths which can be, but need of course to be further developed because not everything is easy, of course. And if you can see on the right, we also like to underline the fact that there are challenges ahead of not only of Europe but to the world, and so it's important that we anticipate them. While today or until now, most of the data have been generated by big organizations. They are stored normally in the cloud, and the amount of data generated is basically coming still from big enterprises. In a few years, what we expect is that most of these data not only will increase in general, so going between 33 to 175 zettabytes, but more important still, most of this data will be generated by personal devices. So it will be us citizens, individuals, which will generate most of this data. Driving connected cars, wearing connected devices, with all the equipment that progressively are populating our houses, which implies the main challenge, not only in terms of dealing with such an amount of data, but especially dealing with a different way of generating data, and which implies also more to give more importance, for example, to the protection of to the ways in which personal data can be shared or not. So if you move to the next slide, here just to show that the European Strategy of Data. So this was the object of a communication from the Commission adopted in February this year. There are four main objectives, if you want to call them in this way. We need to have more data and more facilitation to data to be able to let them flow easily across countries and across sectors. The problem of quality is very important. Probably so far we have mostly addressed the issue of quantity, so trying to make available as many data as possible. But of course now the matter of quality is also very important. We need, and this is a strength, but at the same time creates, let's say, not issues, but creates challenges. We need to be sure that our European rules and values are fully respected. And of course, you may think, first of all, to the protection of personal data. And we need fair and clear rules. Fair, it's, let's say, obvious. Clear, because economic investment and the private sectors need certainty to invest. If there are no clear rules on how data are shared, for example, there will be not enough investment, because there will be no certainty if the use, for example, a certain kind of data is allowed in certain conditions or not. If it is not clear, very often it is just not done. You go to the next slide. So, based on these objectives, the European data strategy has been built or proposed to be built around 4 pillars. First of all, around a pillar on governance. So, what we need is to have the possibility and the certainty to know how data can be shared, what is the governance of places where data are generated. We don't like to call data ownership, but who has the right to reuse the data that I generate when I drive a car, or when I interact on the internet with an application. We need enablers, so we need an infrastructure which is able to digest and to process a lot of this so big amount of data. We need competencies, because of course all this is still relies, and luckily enough it still relies on competencies in individuals, And we know that skills in this specific sector are lacking. The educational system has difficulties in following the pace at which this sector is evolving. So that we need to invest also in upgrading or creating competencies in youngs and in people who is already in the job sector. Finally, to facilitate the exchange of data, what the Commission proposes is to rolling out to establish the so-called common European data spaces, which I will explain in a second in the next slide. If you can go to the next slide, thank you. So data spaces are a concept which puts together many different things. It's not just it's not only a platform, a technical platform where data can be exchanged. It's a set of components, partly physical, so storage spaces if you want, or virtual ones, but also conditions for having data in a certain domain be easily accessible and exchanged. So the communication, so the data strategy underlines a certain number of priority domains, which are relatively obvious: health, industry, agriculture, finance, and so on. For each of them, there should be the establishment of a data space, which is composed by these components which are listed below. So technical tools, of course, for storing data, for exchanging them, not necessarily in a single big infrastructure, but we may also, of course, continue to think in terms of distributed repositories, but transparent to those who want to use them or to access them or to share. A set, again, on technical components, which like, of course, standards and interoperability rules, which allow this data to flow easily. There is also something which is not, let's say, concrete in this term, it's not technical, data governance. So how this data can flow around, what are the rules which, on one hand, data holders could rely on for making their data available, and on the other side, what should be the rules, common rules that data users should rely on for being able to use data in an easy way. We need, of course, IT capacity also, so cloud storage and so on. And so this is the core of what a European data space in a certain domain should be, and this can be complemented by a sort of horizontal layer, on one hand addressing and making available personal data, so this what we call here personal data spaces, so a way in which individuals can contribute, deciding what should be made available and what should not, and under what conditions. And on the other side, we have another layer which is based on what the public sector is generating, which can rely on a sort of already quite consolidated legislation, which defines certain obligation on public bodies to make available the data that they generate in the execution of their mandate for free or under certain specific conditions. So I will detail a bit more this because we are entering more and more into in a way, the core of the subject of this webinar, which is how to reduce data in a certain conditions, and in particular, or not only, but in particular, public data. So if you go to the next slide, I want here to mention first that this data strategy communication included a certain number of, say, mandates on the Commission services to concretely produce in a short term a certain number of actions. Here you can see 4 of them. Adopting and implementing act on high-value dataset, which I will explain a bit later. propose a legislative framework for the governance of these European data spaces. So this is the first condition, because having a legislative framework, not necessarily obligations, it can be also recommendations and let's say soft law, but a certain number of conditions which should allow the establishment of these data spaces on a solid base. A second legislative act may follow in 2021, detailed even more what we are now working on, and which should be adopted very quickly. And of course, we need to observe to be able to react quickly on how the digital economy is reacting, because of course we need to evaluate the impact of what we are doing here, and to try to understand if the impact is proportionate to what we propose to do or not. If you go to the next slide, I want to mention first that which is quite important, it is quite concrete. The public sector directive information, which is in force now, and it's now called actually the Open Data Directive, is the last step of a revision of legislation which obliges member states, public administration member states, to make available their data. And the last version of this directive, adopted in 2019, included an obligation to issue a regulation which would list a certain number of data sets, so concrete content generated by public administration, which must be made available under specific conditions which are even more, let's say, developed than the general rules applicable to any kind of public data. These rules are relatively simple in saying them. So all what will be included in this implementing act will need to be available completely for free, because in general there are still some exceptions. Should be made available, of course, in machine readable format, and most important, through APIs. So the obligation which in general obliges member states to make available data sets through portals, etc. In this case, also requires the availability through APIs, which is extremely important if we seem to reuse made not by human beings who download a dataset, by machines which directly access a data repository. Next slide is only to show that these high-value datasets will, for the time being, belong to a certain number of categories, those categories on the left. So the legislation for the time being is not allowing us to include any kind of high-value dataset. We need to stick to those categories, which are nevertheless extremely wide, and should already be able to make available next year a huge amount of data under these conditions. This regulation is expected to be adopted in beginning 2021. We are now working on something quite critical, which is an impact assessment, which is aiming exactly at evaluate what are the costs for public administration to make available this data for free and investing in APIs, and what are the corresponding benefits in terms of reusers. And of course, we want that all what will be included in the regulation will have more benefits than costs. Next slide, and probably the last one. Last but one. There are some activities ongoing now. The Connecting Europe facility is at the end of its life, 2020, but I mentioned here because it has created the foundation for all we are talking about now, including the Context Broker, which is the specific objective of this webinar. For the future, so in a way, what will follow the Connecting Europe facility is the Digital Europe program. It's a bit different, but it will include all what we have done so far, at least in this context, in the next MFF, so in the next EU budget period from 2021 to 2027. The Digital Euro program is articulated around 5 specific objectives, and what we are talking about here, so all what we have done so far to promote open data will be included in specific objective 2, which addresses AI and data. And the next slide, which is indeed the last one, this is just to remind something which is in a way is a small scale action, but it is still falling under the Connecting Europe Facility program, and it is in a way still a good opportunity to profit of some funding from this program. We have a call addressing public open data, open since end of June and still open until the beginning of November. So it is still something which maybe can still be thought about now. There is still a bit more than 1 month to go. The budget is relatively limited. It's 3 million because well, the whole program is at the end of its life, so the budget is very limited. But it is still an opportunity for actions which could, in a way or the other, help in generating more data and more application of reusing public data, including reusing the context broker, which we are now going to detail in much detail. And I think I am at the end of this introduction. I hope I had more or less kept my time, and thank you for your attention. Caroline, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Daniele.
Thank you, Daniele. Thank you also, Erbil, and hello, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today. So I want to share 2 main messages to say why, basically, in my view at least, why we are here today together in this webinar. And that's also kind of a way to share my hope that we all together make the best of what we can offer by working together, and that this webinar is a good basis for starting or continuing working together. So those 2 messages, the first one will be very straightforward, and it links to the agenda, of course, is to learn how to use our CEF services in general for all building blocks, but also, of course, for the context broker. And the second message is to get inspiration really from recent developments in smart cities, in our building blocks, thanks to the support of our partners in FIWARE and, of course, the participation of OASC today. So yes, on this slide, to start on the first message, how to use our services. So generally speaking, from the CEF Connecting Europe Facility program, and then hoping to continue, of course, that way forward with the Digital Europe program, as Daniele mentioned. So our goal is to support public administrations, and so in this case cities, in their digital transformation. So what I want to say is that in this case, it's coming from your ideas, your needs, or your goals to improve public services to businesses and to citizens, and that's what we want to support. And so how we do that through promoting common digital standards, as it is the best way to increase interconnections across borders and throughout Europe. Now, of course, with CEF, as Daniele mentioned, there is funding available for developing your projects, and that's, of course, the bigger part. But then there is what we call, quote unquote, the support package, so to speak, and that's our building blocks. So that's I want to detail next. If you want to move to the next slide, please. So here, of course, you have the whole family of building blocks, and I won't go into them today, but they range from the data value chain to trust and e-signature, e-identification exchange services, and also translations, and even the domain of procurement. And so, of course, just reach out to us if you are interested in learning more about another one of these. And Context Broker, the focus of today, is, of course, part of the data-oriented building blocks and is integrated, for example, with another building block, the big data test infrastructure, as you will hear more about later today from my colleagues, but also on the 29th, there is a dedicated webinar on BDTI. So next slide, please. Yeah, I want to say very briefly here how to use a building block. Again, talking generally about all building blocks and in the context broker in particular. So there are three ways. You can first buy or use, depending on the business model, a compliant solution available from the market. And we'll have Fireware and OASC talking about their marketplaces, so you know where to get them. It's the same for each building block. On our website, we have lists of conformance solutions, so solutions compliant with the standards that we support and which have passed our conformance testing services. So that's the first part. The second way is, of course, you can build your own solution from scratch based on the standard. And here again, in the different building blocks, we can help you test it for compliance and interoperability. And then the third one, which of course is perhaps the most straightforward one, is to reuse what we call our sample software or reference implementation. And of course, in the case of the context broker, this is the Fireware components, Orion and Cygnus, which you will hear again from Stefano later on. And you can learn how to use them through our services. So this comes back to my first message on how to get started with the standards. You buy, build, or reuse, and basically you start by experimenting with our tools and supporting services. And so if we get to the next slide, I want to actually finish and go to the second message, was to get inspired. Sorry. So you'll hear from Fireware and from OASC about what's happening with Context Broker in smart cities, and also from our team, from Erbil and Regina. And so I want to leave you with the why this is inspiring. So basically, what are the benefits that you can have when you use our standard-based solutions? First one, of course, is speed. Those solutions are mature, they're ready to use, and again, they come with our support services. Second is security. So they're based on open standards. There's no vendor lock-in, and of course, by design, they are made to ensure interoperability with other solutions across Europe. And the third is the future. So if you want those standards, they embody, if you want, the principles and objectives of the EU regulations they are based on. So if you choose one of these solutions, you know that you are in line with the big picture, the longer term values of the European Union, as again, Daniele mentioned, the State of the Union speech. I think it's very relevant here. And so fourth, we are back with the funding opportunity. And so basically you can start experimenting with a building block to develop your project and then use this experience when you submit your proposal in the open calls. And so, yeah, that's with these elements that I want to leave you here and leave the word to my colleagues, and wish us all a very fruitful discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So in order to continue briefly and not to try to exceed and have some time for the Q&A at the very end, I suggest that we move on with the presentation from Stefano, which will be followed by Regina, and I will make a quick update regarding the updates that Caroline spoke a little about. Tell you that. Stefano, I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Erbil, and thank you very much also, Caroline and Daniele, for your outstanding state of the play, because really your messages are really already inspiring for us, and for me at least, in this webinar, but for the further action next days. So in my presentation, I will give you a quick introduction of what the context broker is, and some updates on the technologies that are beyond. So next slide, please. Yes. Digital life. We heard a lot about data from Daniele and before. And all what we have around, starting as well as from our human being behavior, is to understanding what we have around before to take any decision. This is normal way of behaving as human beings. With our senses, we get information from around, And then because of the information we have, we took some action whether to make steps in the street or be covered because it's raining. Actually, it's now raining quite heavily here in Roma, or and so these kind of things. But also, of course, information about our business, whether to make a contract or not, or and so on. So normally we do that. So why not? The ICT system should do the same. And this is exactly what we are meaning here by in the support of CEF Context Broker and to support our digital life. That is having some methods and tools and technologies to allow to gather information from what happening around in a way that machines can take them on board and react. This means understanding the context around. And for us, this is the core of implementing smart solutions and smart applications. So they are applications that are able to react to the context. Please consider that this is a huge shift in paradigm from traditional software. Of course, now Context Broker is there since years, but it's exactly this. So now we are getting used more and more, all of us as citizens, to use software not necessarily always give you the same answer, because the conditions around are changing and the software also support this. This is something that is natural, but it's something that is happening. So next slide, please. Unfortunately, what happened is that ICT has a long history since basically Second World War and so on. So what happened is that many different layers of software exist, have been built, application investments have been done, and so on. So because of many reasons, we have a lot of software that operate often in silos. But this is not a criticism to that, it's just the reality. It's not because one department is against the other one or whatever. It's not simply because investment have been done during years. It's because organization, they change their structure, so merging of organization, splitting organization, and things like that. So that is again another natural thing. So natural, we have unfortunately this situation that organization work in silos, and consequently the software and the data are often archived in silos. So next slide, please. So here is what we, given this context, also ourselves can say this way, here is what we want to overcome. So to create something, and we call this Context Broker, that is able to enable organization from public administration to business to collect, manage, and share context information. So the goal is, first of all, managing real-time, but even more right-time information from different sources that might be heterogeneous. Why I say real-time and right-time? Because the issue here is that, yes, it's important to have the information, but it's important to have information at the moment they are needed in order to take an informed decision. Because if I am at a bus stop and I have information that the bus has passed, so this is unfortunately useless. So it's important that I arrive at the bus stop before the bus arrives as well. So in order to catch it. To make a trivial example, but this is what we mean when we speak about right information. Second is that we are able to process all this information in a way that system can support to take decisions. And this means harmonize different data sources, because as I said before, they may come from different situations, but they have to be analyzed in the same way. So they have to be interoperable in a way. The third element is what very nicely Caroline said before. Everything should be based on standards. why this is standards is because it makes easier the way to interoperate each other, and it make it also easier the way to grow all together. So next slide, please. So if such a standard exists, and it exists, it is exactly the idea to create a context information layer that manage data coming from different sources, making them harmonized and easy, accessible by applications. They can take them. So it's not to create links between the various silos directly, because this is difficult. This also many times can be useless because things change. What we want to do is a layer that is able, in a dynamic way, also to gather this information to harmonize them. And this is extremely important. So this layer is able, first of all, carries a description of what the data are, and then allows also the access to this, because it knows where the data are, how to manage them. This bypassing the need of the application to know exactly the data, how to manage the specific data, creating a complexity in software that is terrible. Next slide, please. This is exactly, I want to tell you this about this experience that was made by one of our members of the Fiverr Foundation, who they built an application called DE4BIOS, which is a system that has been used by some public administrations, first in Italy, then afterwards in other regions, to provide a tool to fight COVID-19, at least the explosion, the expansion of COVID-19. Basically, what they did just in 5 days, they were able to collect information coming from different sources and harmonize them in order to give to decision makers, doctors, and policymakers to take decisions on how to trace and to put in place measures. And what is interesting here is that those archives that were already existing, so it's not that the guy that implements something on that, they simply reuse archives that in principle they were in silos, well, basically they were in silos, but through the system that is based on Context Broker, they allow the easy access to all of them together. So we have an archive about test case, the tests made by people, patients, about where archives where people are living, archives where people are working, and so on. So in the next slide, yes, you see that they created a dashboard that allows doctors to access the data of their patient and understand the behavior of their own patients, and public administration to understand where the infected people were living and then where they were moving, in order to understand how to control and to create specific areas of concerns or lock or whatever. As I said before, this application has been built in 5 days. So the business idea as the core, the Context Broker allowed this harmonization of data. So next slide, please. So let me go on now a bit in a more technical part, explaining what does it mean in technical terms doing information modeling. So the NGSI, that is the standard that Context Broker uses, was born in the GSMA, the GSMA Association, and this already several years ago, and it was based on a very simple model, a model which allows you to define which are the entity of concerns and which are the attributes that describe those entities, and of course how to evaluate those attributes. So very simple things. Of course, on top of this, there are APIs that allows you to access this information model. Now this this model, next slide please, evolved when we, Faubourg Foundation, we took on board the NGSI V2 and push and participate in ETSI to make it an official standard. Of course, through the collaboration with other entities in ETSI, also the model and the standard evolved. This is why now we call NGSI LD, because there's been added an important element which allows to create relationships between the different entities of interest of the model. So next slide, please. So the evolution from the original NGSI to the to NGSI LD is exactly to have these entities described, which are to describe specific physical or virtual objects, which are identified using your eyes in order to have this very well identified. The attributes that describe the entities, they are of two kinds. So we have the property that allows to describe the values that that describe the entity. In particular, there is the possibility to have geo properties. So, and this is very important because often we have data which needs to be understood and contextualize the geospatial dimension. So maybe not only you might need the time that is needed in order for a bus to arrive to a bus location, but also if you know where the bus is, you might even guess yourself, which can be the conditions on the situation, of course, or management of the routes or whatever else. Then, so this is an important add. And then the relationship became itself an object, as I showed in the slide before. So this allows also to make it more, let's say, concrete and evident in order to create this linkage between data. Next slide, please. So also with respect to NGSI and NGSI LD, you have some fixed attributes like the one that are listed here. So location, observed, add, created, modified, and Unicode that allows some specific properties to be always kept. So the geospatial location of an entity, if it makes sense, and particularly the logging of the data that has been collected. Next slide, please. Yes, I would like to show very simply the use of this of NGSI through a very simple example. So here we have a data model describing a conceptual model describing a parking system. So you have the vehicle, you have a person who is driving the car, you have the offset of the parking, and then you have the relationship between these things. If you go in the next slide, you see here how this is represented using JSON. So this is using NGSI V2. So although this is a version of a representation that is very close to NGSI LD, because some, let's say, some update has been considered. For instance, the ID of the vehicle is expressed using URI already. Well, normally in GSI V2 you can simply write car 1 or car 2 or the plate of the target, so there is no specific requirement. Why? As we will see in GSI LD, this is mandatory to have the ID expressed in URI terms. And if you go in the next slide, you see here that all of this is taken on board, and particularly, for instance, the is parked, which is the relationship of the car with the parking slot, is now also an identification, which in the previous slide is This is in JSI2 V2, you don't have this. So the relationship itself exists as an instance of the data that are collected into the information model. So next slide, please. What I here would like to say is that, of course, all of this is what I've shown is not theory, because there are already products in the market that uses the context broker as core of their solution. To find them, you can go in the Faubourg marketplace. You will hear also a bit of it in the next presentation from Regina. And then in here you see that there are solutions that have been collected there. And this solution, how based on, in fact, as on the context broker. You have also a list of devices that can be plug and play use in this application, because they implemented in their firm the context broker APIs, so that you can plug and play the device without and connect directly to the context broker without to create specific and dedicated connectors. And these are agreements with several vendors, and you find them in the marketplace, as well as you find also some other vendors that provide services like consultancy, training, or even coaching for the use. So this is certainly a good place where materialization of the use of context broker is made real. Next slide, please. About data modeling, next slide. There are several initiatives about data modeling, and you will hear also from OASC later about that this is the core element of use of to make the context information relevant, because without data model, you don't have anything. But to avoid the blank sheet syndrome, there are already some data models that have been implemented and provided. Here are the links to the resources so that you can reach. And these data models are there. Either they are based already on existing standards, so certainly we are not reinventing the wheel, or they are based on an initiative that we have together with OASC and TM Forum, where in working with cities, there is a merging of specific data models for, in particular, for smart cities. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here you have the references about how to use NGS-ILD. You have the references to the specification, first of all, of course, because maybe you want to implement your own version of the context broker. As Caroline said, at CEF, we provide already a sample software there, but there are other possibilities to create other version of it or partial version of it, depending on the needs. So the specification are there. Together with the specification, you have also tutorials, the test suite, and the context broker sample software itself, so that it can be downloaded and studied and used. There are in the tutorials, there are examples on how to build platforms or solutions that embody the CEF Context Broker as key component. So next slide. Yes, so this was my last slide. Thank you for your attention. I think later we will have time for questions.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Indeed, thank you very much for this wonderful explanations, details. Time is indeed of essence. So without further ado, Regina, you can take over so we can go through quickly a couple of slides before leaving the floor to OASC.
Yes, thanks, Erbil. So yeah, so you can move to my one and only slide. It will be quick. So as Stefano has mentioned, I'm here to give a quick update and overview of one of the services that we have available for the CEF Context Broker. So these are the enablers. So these enablers are available for you to complement and further enable you to test and utilize a newly installed Context Broker or Cygnus and see if it can successfully communicate with other building blocks or other big data environments or other open data portals. So in the spring of 2020, we expanded actually our suite of Context Broker services by adding this data visualization enabler alongside our existing integration solutions for big data and open data portal. So we also provided in the same timeline some initial versions of an NGSI LD ready version of these integration solutions. So first, our newest enabler, the data visualization enabler. So one of the things we identified in a workshop in spring of 2020 is that one of the challenges is that it's a bit difficult for users, first-time users, so in Context Broker, to go through the initial stage of working and actually embarking in the usage of the Context Broker. So here, the idea is to overcome this learning curve, and here the data visualization enabler can help you overcome this challenge by providing an easy way through a graphical user interface to add a visualization layer over your context broker. So this will allow you to experiment and potentially debug with the real-time and data that's coming from the context broker or historical data from Cygnus. So you can also actually connect multiple context brokers to this visualization layer and make experimentations for data comparison, validation, or simply to present your data that you are getting from the context broker. So similarly, we also have a complete set of tutorials and documentation for you to be able to use and customize this visualization layer. So these are all available in the links that you see in this slide. So next we have the integration with the BDDI. So real-time data in the context broker can be persisted and stored as historical data. So having this data that is persisted in a big data environment can make it possible for you to make sense of your historical data and create more value. So this integration, this big data integration will allow you for an easy way to configure how to store your context broker data from a context broker to any big data environment using HDFS. So this is obviously compatible with the big data test infrastructure building block, and as I mentioned, any big data environment using HDFS. So the next solution we have is for the open data portal. So the context broker gives you the ability to share and use some real-time data from different sources and being able to create an ecosystem of compatible data solutions. So making this real-time context broker data available in an open data portal, such as the European data portal, can further this value chain of having this open data accessible to all. So with this integration, it allows you to easily publish this real-time context broker data to any open data portal that accepts the DCAT AP format. So specifically, as I mentioned, this can be used to publish your context data to the European data portal. So for the integration with big data and open data portal, we have both V2 and GSI LD versions available, and documentation for usage is complete in their respective pages as seen in the slide. So all these enablers are openly available on the CEF marketplace, as Stefan has also mentioned, as well as in GitHub. And there is a more in-depth training available, and you can access that through that link or through the CEF Context Broker website. That's it for me. Thanks, Ervil.
Thank you very much, Regina. I will just quickly finish up actually the build-up of what was said up until now, starting from Daniele. So we, as the CEF Context Broker team, it's our main objective to be able to present to you all the different topics that were discussed here in the optimized way. And In order to raise the awareness around our solution, we are participating in a lot of events, which, although the COVID-19 situation was not easy to handle, turned into the digital participations. We have participated in a couple of events organized by our social provider partner Faubourg, and there is another one coming through in October. The CEF Context Broker building block will also have a virtual booth in the CEMIC 2020 conference, which will fully online and a virtual experience for the 15th of October. And there's the Smart Cities event on the 22nd of October. We are beginning also strict collaboration with Living in EU project, which I invite everyone to follow closely on our social media disseminations, our website, which we'll be highlighting. Last but not least, there is the European Big Data Value Forum in November. More details will follow on to that the coming weeks. So I invite everybody to follow us closely on the different channels. And one extra information about not only the different solutions that were presented specifically by Regina, I will make sure that the uploaded video contains all the relevant links and also will be showcased into our soon to be launched landing page, which I'm more than happy to give you a quick preview to our privileged audience. So this is our current web page, perfectly functional and wonderful, but we wanted to have a much more updated version. Please bear with me, and it's still under development, but soon to be live. So starting from next week, we'll be more than happy to welcome you onto our updated content page, and the different information that we discussed currently will be hopefully better displayed to you via this space. So very exciting days up to come, and we are more than happy to have you aboard journey with us. I would really like to switch now to Davor, who will be taking over and taking the stage for the presentations on Open Agile Smart Cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's our pleasure to present the work that we do as Open and Agile Smart Cities. My name is Davor Meersman. I am the CEO of OASC. Next slide, please. Yeah, so next slide. Yeah, so Open and Agile Smart Cities is a global network of cities, so not just in Europe, but primarily in Europe. It's also from where we originated. That was 5 years ago. We were working with a number of institutional partners alongside cities, and there was, let's say, a fundamental problem with the market mechanisms around those early day smart city projects. So what a lot of the cities were running into is that the business models or the results of these innovation and research projects would have a difficult time finding a footing and kind of living on, and therefore achieving the impact that was initially envisaged. We did the analysis, and the problem we saw was mainly related to interoperability, meaning that one solution for a city would have a difficult time being implemented, being replicated in another city, simply because the whole environment was quite different. Rightfully so, cities are different, but we set up on a mission to find out how we could be different with a group of cities and actually globally, but still be minimally interoperable. So we started with 31 cities in 7 countries. Today we have 155 in 31. And we had the opportunity also through a large-scale pilot to find out, let's say, what is minimally needed for cities to exchange solution services and data amongst them, even if the infrastructures and the setups and the policy goals, the cultural aspects, the histories and so forth of these cities are wildly different. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that is the central question that we asked ourselves. Back then, we didn't know what the answer was. We knew it would have to do something with open data, open services, open APIs, and also that as a group, we need to be implementation driven to find out the answer to this question. Next slide, please. So we had the large-scale pilot Synchronicity, which taught us really, down to the fine-grained technical level of specifications and implementations, what is needed to make this minimal interoperability work. Out of that project came the initial set of minimal interoperability mechanisms that were adopted by the whole community. So those are a context management API, which refers to the ETSI SIM standard, but of course is the same as the CEF building block, the context broker. It's also a set of data models, and then once you have those, well, you have a way to exchange context and speak the same language, but you also need ways in which to provide access under certain conditions and so forth. So those are the marketplace mechanisms, let's say. Meanwhile, our group of cities have adopted 2 more MIMs as work items. So the city of Helsinki is championing the development of a MIM 4 on personal data management, which essentially allows services that use personal data to also go beyond the typical legal confines of a national policy and so forth. So essentially opening up the market specifically related to that. And then the 5th MIM, which is championed by the city of Amsterdam, is called Fair Artificial Intelligence, and that essentially allows you to look under the hood of technology and see where decisions have been taken by AI, and essentially kind of interface that with city governance as well. On this journey we were on, and we started as a very bottom-up kind of grassroots initiative 5 years ago. We incorporated a little under 3 years ago. We've worked, and of course today are still working with global partners such as the European Commission, but also the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and so forth. So we've been quite successful in promoting from the demand side out this position, let's say, on minimal interoperability through in this global context. And we see that what we've done as a network, and of course also as a Synchronicity project, has now made its way to the reference that was earlier made, so the Join Who Sustain initiative, where we lead the technical working group. We see also references more and more in competitive research and innovation calls, but also tenders coming out of the European level, referencing, let's say, those that work. There is currently also an initiative in the context of the United Nations under U4SSC, where we essentially do that also, but then for the world. So that's an important aspect, I think, that you are globally but minimally interoperable. Another aspect I think that works for us is that we are purely on the demand side. So nowhere in our governance are there companies making decisions. Obviously, we work with companies who in a sense, drive the process forward and so forth. Next slide, please. But I think there is some more information available on the MIMS and the work we did there that you can click on once the slides are shared. Next slide, please. I think a particularly interesting evolution we've seen over the last years is that it's not just, let's say, the city level and then the global level, or typically the cities who are well linked up and to that level and kind of dedicate resources towards managing those opportunities and positions. But the MIMS and the work we've done now also find their way in national strategies. So These are a few that are have already been published. There are more, let's say, in the work. So Japan has adopted the work that we've done. The region of Flanders, who actually have been kind of aligned with us for a long time, but have now formalized that also under the VLOCA initiative. And then in the Netherlands, the operational guidelines for cities and kind of the whole digital strategy pertaining to cities also make specific reference there. So what you see there, I think, is also for anybody listening to this webinar. Yes, it's the Commission talking, and it's us as a group of cities, but it's going to pay dividends also through this densification of adoption of national strategy, not just in Europe, but also beyond. And I think it's kind of a really cool thing to see, and it's definitely I think the good move, let's say, to align with this. Next slide, please. As part of kind of incorporating and growing as an organization, we have developed over the past year and a half a number of services. Some of them we run already for a few years, where we have the primary objective of interfacing cities with other cities in a peer learning environment, focused on helping drive digital transformation forward in the right way, but maybe also different directions. Next slide, please. So I'll give a sneak preview of what we will be launching this fall. So we have a number of these services we already offer today, but we are putting everything under one new brand called the City by City brand that kind of signifies it's cities interacting with cities. It's stuff made by cities, and of course it's also something that grows city by city. The primary, I think, valuable thing that we offer is a catalog. So based on the results of Synchronicity, we have been building a catalog that is now finding adoption, let's say, where we essentially want to show to other cities what cities are up to. So what are cities deploying, what works, what are the technical details, what is typically the infrastructure you would need to run something, what is the impact that you might expect on any kind of dimension when implementing these products. Then we have an academy that we're launching. So essentially that is of course, based on all the learnings we have had over the years, where it's a type of almost vocational education for city administrations to help them, raise the competences and kind of remove some of those barriers in digital transformation and be able to make the right decision in this increasingly open and ecosystem-driven evolution. And then also the festival that we have, which is essentially a rebrand of the Connected Smart Cities and Communities festival that we have been running for 6 years now. So the 7th iteration will be fully online. I'll give a few more details on the next slide. Yeah, so the City by City catalog is, let's say, it's an umbrella under which also other catalogs of other initiatives fall. But the main thing is that we share the information so that there is a global repository where you can essentially find out, what cities are up to. An example is that we are using, let's say, the platform also for the Intelligent Cities Challenge Marketplace. For the mandate we have within the UN SDG 11 Global Council, and of course also for our own purposes. For cities it is free, and for companies it's also free to add city profiles and deployments and so forth, and for companies to add solutions and where you've been active. There's a certain process to follow, but if you are interested in kind of being part of that, please do get in touch, and we're a bit busy now with delivery, but we'll get you up and running in considerable within a reasonable time frame. Next slide, please. The academy that we will launch next month with a few first free courses, essentially focused on figuring out standards which are right for me, which will work, what's important, what should I think of, what are the options out there, what are the different implementations of the context broker specification, what works, what are the advantages of one versus the other. Where can I find more information and so forth. Yeah, so there's a ton of content. We'll communicate that about that also in our newsletter. Sign up to that. Then next slide, please. Finally, we have our Oh no, sorry, one back. Our conference. So we are rebranding that as a festival, which will be fully online. So far, the past 6 editions have been in Brussels, which typically had about 400 people show up and then about 500 or so stream in. We've done away, let's say, with the physical component, which helps us as a global network. So in a sense, that was quite good for us. So it will be a 2-day program, 48 hours. We follow the sun over the different chapters we have. We'll have parts of the program also localized in for example, Spanish and other languages. And we will present that, the more details on that also in the coming weeks. So again, it's a sneak preview, but if you want to get more information, just find our website, get in touch. We'll help you along. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you very much, Davor. We will sure follow up also from our end for this wonderful event. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yes, I forgot to mention that also CEF will have a spot at the festival if you want to kind of follow up and go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Vincent Desmortiers from Faubourg Numérique, who will do his presentation, but I know that Vincent, you will take the control of the screen. So
yes, please, Erbil, if you can make me the presenter.
Doing it as we speak.
Okay. Okay, so you should see my screen now. So I'm here talking in the name of an association called Faubourg Numérique, which is acting as a digital innovation hub and who is involved also in the FiWare iHubs network. We are located in northern France. We are really a bottom-up organization and with a governance based on the implication of the entrepreneurs community, with the goal to structure a local innovative community, but also to mutualize means to support digital transformation. So our activities are really structured as a digital innovation hub. We are mainly focused on the private sector, and just want to share with you very good news for us, because we have just been selected by a new network in the area of robotics. So that's more for the private sector, but just also it's good to mention that what we are talking about the technology applied in the smart city domain, the same technology is more or less the same technology is also applied in the industrial sector. So what we have as an asset and as a competence center, we based our offer on a platform, a FiWare platform, the what we call the good old one, which is the V2, and the brand new one, the LD version that we have implemented a few months ago. And we use this platform to provide our members and local stakeholders digital twin as a service offer. And we use this platform to provide mainly test before invest, but also the full picture of services offered by Digital Innovation Hub. And we also leverage this infrastructure to animate and manage an acceleration program in various domains, but also again within the local governments and public administration area. And especially to stimulate and to engage the local governments, we have initiated, I think in 2015, the French chapter of Open and Agile Smart City. And now we have, I think, 9 cities active in this French network. And we can point out here the metropole of Nice and the city of Saint-Quentin that are also powered by Fireware. They have their city platform based on Fireware implementation. So, of course, I don't have to explain why we love memes. I think Davor has provided the most high-level explanation. And I think it's important also to say that the memes are really implemented, and the CEF building blocks are very concrete tools to see how to implement interoperability and data-driven decision-making. And again, this kind of facilities, I think, could be really leveraged by the future European digital innovation networks. It's something I think we have to support. So I will try to give you a very concrete example that we have supported locally in the medium-sized cities, so the city of Saint-Quentin. It's very interesting because we have a complete journey of what it means to implement open standards like the context broker and other components for a city. So it started with experimentation, especially through an Interreg project called Sci-Fi. And then from the learnings from this experimentation, the city, with the support with our DIH, they have started a procurement process, or a public procurement process, and launch tenders, integrated very concrete and explicit references to the context broker APIs, so the NGSI LD standard published by ETSI, and also to the synchronicity guide. And it was a success. They have received a significant amount of very interesting proposition, and the implementation have just started this summer. And the next step now, so with this basis, it's allowing the city of Saint-Quentin to go further to implement more advanced technology like machine learning, or in more general artificial intelligence, or blockchain technologies. And this is also supported by the participation in the CEF project called ODALA, Open Data Lake, where the Fireware Foundation and Open and Agile Smart Cities are also involved, also together with our association Faubourg. So, talking about a concrete example, I'm going to use this use case in the city of Saint-Quentin for the management of the sport fields, and especially concerning the watering operation. So, when you are talking about sport field maintenance and operation, of course, you have to deal with the reservation of the sport field by for football matches or training, or I don't know what. And it's important also to take into account the weather forecast. There are some soil sensors that provide some information about the soil moisture, for instance. There are also machinery like the robotic mowers. And of course, there is the infrastructure to manage automatically the watering of the sport fields. And the impact of optimizing this kind of system is very significant, as shown on this slide. And of course, it's a question of interoperability and definition of data models. So it's very important to have strong references, international and recognized and also adopted references. And what have been described by, especially by Stefano and Davor, are very important for us on the ground to be credible and to provide efficient services. And on the other hand, also it's very important to have to not reinvent the wheel, but to use already created data models to accelerate the implementation. So what have been described, it's clear that this use of open standards allows the city of Saint-Quentin and other cities, I guess, to define their public tender, and also to avoid vendor locking. And another effect of this is that it opens this kind of market to SMEs. And in this example, the city of Saint-Quentin has selected a well-known French company involved in the fireware community. It's called EGM, and they won this public tender with their solution. And just to mention that they are also featured in the new white paper from the Fireware Foundation about smart cities. And the other winner of the public tender is also another French SME called Hostby that is in charge of the application for the green services, and they have also implemented the management of the devices and other systems. And again, it's a very, I don't go through the details, of course, because it has been done previously, but here the key is really the interoperability and the possibility to find operational solutions. And when talking about vendor locking and base the solution on open source, it has also another effect that really it changed the relationship in terms of business between SMEs and corporate. Because the relationship is really more fair, because there is no question of proprietary technology. And when it's based on open source, the business relations are more fair, and it's really more efficient in terms of collaboration. And here we have a good example, because Hostby has developed a proxy for fireware, and NGSI LD proxy for the Rainbird system. Another very important global resource, I've already talked about this, is the standard and harmonize the data models. And it's really important to have this, let's say, a common language to exchange with the users, with the technology providers and the solution providers. And this, of course, provides the possibility to develop very efficient tools based on again open standards and open data models. And to develop this kind of tools, it's very fast and efficient. So also important to leverage all this possibility. Faubourg Numérique is also a member of a consortium to apply to the European Digital Innovation Hub program that will start, I guess, at the beginning of next year. And to do this, we partner with a very big player in France called CEF Digital, who is active mainly in the region of Paris, our capital, but it has a national impact. And we are really, so the project is called Summity. I invite you to visit the website. And just to confirm what Davor said before, for us, it's a very important tool to, let's say, fill the gap between the city level and the European or global level, and have this national structure and a vector for national adoption of this kind of initiatives. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Vincent. I will quickly, because I see that the time is, we're coming to a close of our presentation. I will just skip to the very last and relevant. Oh, but it decided not to go there. Interesting. Apologies for that. But I don't have a direct view, Regina. If there are any questions on the...
No, I don't see anything actually.
Okay, so it's a good time as any to ask our audience if there are any questions that we can address at this point, whether it's on the presentations or any other topic that comes into mind. Quickly trying to check. I see, yes, the slides will all be available on our CEF Digital website, and also the recording of this webinar, so the details of what was said can be revisited at will. And I do believe it will be either tomorrow or Monday, absolutely. The updated page of the event. I also see at the very beginning that we had a question regarding coming from Havan. If entities outside Europe, for example in Asia, decide to use CEF building blocks, this so they are in line with interoperability, security, and values of Europe, can they do so? And thank you for the details of that you're representing clients with building smart city solutions in Southeast Asia. I suggest that I think I have your coordinate email addresses within your registration. I will get back in touch with you to talk about the specifics, but we will be more than happy to help you in your journey. And going through, I don't see any other question. As said previously, in this case, I will just on the last closing words, I would like to thank you for your participation, which made this event a success. All of our speakers are invitees from OASC. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. Very active times are up ahead, and we'll be more than happy to share with you through our channels, so make sure to follow us. And I hope to see everyone very soon. Similar events or other, but please do get back in touch, and your feedback is always very much appreciated. Thank you everyone for your participation, and I wish you a very pleasant day, and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you.